What's up? It's Mike. Enjoying the podcast? Want more? Head on over to patreon.com/comesatimepod for a bonus episode each week. That's patreon.com/comesatimepod. Welcome back to Comes a Time. I'm Mike.
I'm O'Teal.
Duncan fucking Trussell. That's all I gotta say. And I'm sorry, Mrs. B, I swore.
Okay.
We had the man on. We've been waiting for this one, and I'm telling you, I think it's the beginning of a multiple visit.
Oh yeah, I'm thrilled he even knew about our podcast and seemed to really dig it already. But yeah. I just, I want to talk about the spiritual stuff, man. That's what made us hit it off as friends. And it's so great when you have a guest on like that, where you can just
dive right in.
Yeah, you can get straight to it, and that did not disappoint.
O'Teal, this must be like this for you, and it's like this with comics, where it's like if I run into a comic I never met, I have more in common with him than most people I've known forever. If you run into a musician, a bass player, you're able to sit and talk bass right away. It's cool that I'm starting to feel that way with spiritual people as well. You know what I mean? Where it's like I've always wanted to, and I always felt like interested, but now I feel like with this platform and with the conversations that we're having, like it's just, oh, you're into like,
it's like it's coming into focus, like
exactly,
high def,
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, this is the guy that is responsible for Ram Dass having a podcast before he died.
Duncan's.
I mean, that's pretty cool. And the whole synchronicity around the way that happens is just really awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible. You guys are going to love it. Thank you so much for joining with us on this journey. If you're loving the podcast, you can follow us on Patreon, patreon.com/comesatimepod to get a new extra episode every week. And we're here on the Osiris Network, home to a ton of amazing podcasts. So make sure you go to osirispod.com and check out our brother and sister podcasts. Enjoy Duncan. Stay safe. We'll see you soon. Dive right in. Duncan, it's a pleasure to see you. Thank you for joining us on Comes the Time. This is going to be we've been waiting. We said Duncan's got to be on the podcast, and here he is. If you put it out there, he will show up.
Of course, absolutely. How could I say no to y'all? Seriously. No one says no to you. I'm sure you could get anyone on here you wanted to. You could get Q on here.
We're trying to get dead people.
Well, are you having a problem doing that? It seems like that'd be easy.
It's just their audio. They're on a different frequency. We're trying to reach their frequency.
Oh, you mean literal dead people? I thought you meant like Grateful Dead people. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. They're everywhere. You have a problem finding them? They're everywhere. Oh, dead people. I mean, yeah, you could figure, you know what? That's something that's really freaky that somebody tweeted at me that I believe it's Microsoft has patented a way to sort of generate an algorithm from a person's like online personality and sort of create an AI version of them that will theoretically be just like them. Meaning that if someone does pass, then you could sort of grab all of their socials and bring them back to life.
Jesus.
That's disturbing on so many levels. First, that they have that much information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Second and third and fourth, whatever. Wow.
I know. And the Book of Revelations, 2012 Book of Revelations, it's the one that all the zombie movies use, which is that the dead will return. And it's like kind of close to what's about to happen. And it is disturbing. I don't want someone to have me in a little like aquarium in their computer or something, you know? Then that's what's going to happen. And then also the 23andMe, we just give our freaking DNA because we want to see how like Irish or whatever the fuck we are, and that's what they have our DNA, and they can like animate us. That means theoretically they could clone us.
Yeah, all to find out if we actually have a lactose intolerance. It's like, listen, if you shit after cheese, you have it. Like, just that's all you have to know.
There's gonna be like, they're going to be clones of us mining some shitty asteroid, being like, yeah, the person that they cloned me from thought they were lactose intolerant, but they weren't sure. And so now right, I'm eternally on a meteor mine.
If they're not already.
Good point.
Yeah, for real.
Duncan, this is, I think, let's see, March 14th or 15th of 2020. My last stand-up set was like the 13th or 14th. I packed up, went to hang with my wife because she's a nurse living in another state. And I tried to sleep and I couldn't sleep. And I said, what do I do instead of Xanax? And I listened to Raghu's podcast, Ram Dass Here and Now. Yeah. And I swear, dude, it was like someone rocking me to sleep at night, just listening to Ram Dass from generations past, from his old talks. And it just lulled me back. I religiously would listen to it every single night when I went to sleep into July.
Wow.
And it was just a life changer. I knew who he was, and I was obviously a huge, huge lover of him. But man, when I needed him, he was waiting for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so great. That's it. That's that. I did the same thing when I was really like horrifically depressed years and years ago. I started I would have my laptop. I was had a mattress on the floor. I was in this a literal roach motel, as in the place was infested with roaches. And I would lay there and roaches would crawl on me. But I was listening to Ram Dass, and at night it was the way he just cuts through right into where you're at and sort of reminds you that that's just the perfect place to get going. It's there's a resurrective quality in what he does.
Yeah, I got into a good Ram Dass period right after this whole thing happened. I guess it was the lectures that became Be Here Now. It was on an audiobook. And so I listened to that whole thing. And I was like, my mom had that book when I was growing up. I remember seeing it because the cover was so interesting. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. My mom was into this, and because she has that whole Black Panther side, but then she has the total hippie Ram Dass. I was like, wow, this is cool. And it really helped me again today because I've been feeling really conflicted, obviously, since the whole attack on the Capitol and all that. Yeah. It's how do you merge those things together? It's not even inside my head. It's it's a real threat, and how do you, maintain hope, faith, whatever, any kind of peace, just making anxiety go away. So I was listening to your last podcast with Raghu right before this, and I was like, oh man, there's so many things I wrote down that just it was really, really great what you guys are doing. It's kind of what me and Mike wanted to do when we first met. We kind of hit it off super quick. I came on his podcast, and for some reason he revealed to me this mystical experience that he had that really saved him when he was down. And so I told him about mine, which is legit Outer Limits, Star Trek, what Twilight Zone, whatever. Wow. Kind of like what happened to Ram Dass when he met
Neem Karoli Baba.
Yeah, when something, this happened to me with my mentor, Colonel Bruce. He did something that was impossible for him to know, and I was like, wait a minute. Now, I grew up believing more mystical stuff, but against religion. But you have something like that happen to you. Or if you have something happen for you, like what Mike had and what I had later, much, much later on, just these intense moments of grace, from,
Yeah.
And so that whole thing, when I was listening to your last podcast with Raghu, I was like, oh man, I always knew you got it. But it was just how you were speaking to this time right now since the Capitol building. It's so beautiful. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh God. Yeah.
Thank you for coming on the podcast to
my pleasure.
Help extend this to our fans that most of whom probably follow you already. But, one thing you guys talked about that I wanted to talk about too, is this idea of karma, like American karma.
Yeah.
Like, is this another... Because I think some people think we've gotten away with this without having any karma really for a long time, but we did with the Civil War.
Yeah.
That was we lost more people in the Civil War than all of our other wars put together.
Yeah.
To this day. So I'm wondering if this is another,
yeah,
another karmic thing where it's like, we just got to go through it.
Well, I mean, I like the idea of as above, so below. So, because if I start trying to wrestle with what everyone's rainbow wheel is spinning right now, trying to sort of come up with a way to not have a civil war and a feeling of, oh my God, I don't think it's close, but it's certainly closer than I imagined it was. I knew we were divided, but I never thought that something like that could have happened. And so, when you see a thing like that, that's the collective shadow, right? That's the collective shadow. That's what Carl Jung always said I guess the combination of everyone's karma gets projected onto the screen of history. And that's what we see in our leaders and everything that's happening. And so, but then if I spend too much time thinking about that, I go crazy. So then I just try to think about my own, my own, I think it's called flowering karma. They break karma down into the seed of something that hasn't grown into your life yet, and the stuff growing into your life right now. And even things from past incarnations, which is really terrifying to imagine that you're still paying debts from lifetimes ago.
Yeah.
But so I try to just sort of, that's why I love, I think that is what's so beautiful about Ram Dass's one core teaching of his, which is we work on ourselves. That's the number one best thing you can do, period. If the collective karma is of our government or wars or whatever the big historic stuff is collective karma, it would make sense that we would think, okay, then we're going to attack the government. But that's eating your own tail. That's not going to do anything. But collectively, if we all start working on ourselves, so that in our own lives, one of the things Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who's my teacher's teacher, said was, what is this thing where people come home and they're a completely different person than when they're out in the world? They present themselves to the world as some sweet, jolly thing, but then they get home and they're all hammered and yelling at their kids and what is that? Who is that? And maybe if that, and we're all that. I mean, nobody's perfect. So that's the thing. We all start working on that. Then maybe that if enough of us are doing that, then we could expect there to be a reflection of that work appearing in history. And so that to me gives me some real practical things to do. But then Raghu said in that podcast, Ram Dass was also, he was an activist. He was going out in the streets. He was protesting. He was not just fooling himself into thinking cleaning up his own act was enough. There was this a social aspect of it too.
Well, when you guys were talking about I think my favorite thing that came out of that whole conversation was how do you, or maybe this is a YouTube you sent me, Mike, which was you with Ram Dass
and Raghu.
You said, how do you love that person inside you that says you're not worth loving, that you don't deserve it, that you're a fake, you're a phony, you're a whatever, you know? And I thought that's really getting to it. When you talk about working on yourself, that was the huge turning point for me. How do you love yourself? I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
And it took my path, getting to it the way I got to it, and Mike's getting to it the way he got to it. And we're still getting to it, really, right?
Yeah.
I'm not there yet. Or else why am I still biting my nails or whatever? I'm still doing it.
Yeah. Well, it's like compared to, when paper's rolled up and you push the paper down and then it rolls itself back up, like when you have it's compared to that. So it's not you don't just finish it usually. But this is in the type of Buddhism I'm studying, they really want you to get enlightened, and even though that's a controversial thing to talk about, and in some spiritual communities, it's sort of don't worry about that bullshit. They want you to get enlightened because they within the framework of that particular philosophy or religion is the possibility that in your lifetime you can get actually enlightened, like Neem Karoli Baba, like all the great saints. Like it can happen in a single lifetime, even though from that very same perspective, we've incarnated so many times that you have been my mom, I have been your mom. We've all been each other's mothers and child, and every bird and every creature has been your mom. That's how long we've been trapped in samsara. But to get a human birth is like, it's like winning the lottery 17 times in a row. There's more, in this cosmology, there's more gods than there are humans. There's more deities than humans. That's how rare the human birth is. So if you find yourself in a human birth, the recommendation is, get enlightened. And that means like a complete transformation in the way you see yourself, which is why these Tibetan teachers, when they hear in the West, there's this affliction we have, which is we don't like ourselves. And these Tibetan people who, like the tulkus, who've been raised up who've been born into a system where the idea of what the self is much bigger than the idea of what the self is in the West. When they hear someone saying, I just don't like myself, they get confused because it's like someone saying, I don't like the universe, or I don't like everything, because that's how they see the self. Whereas our selves are all compressed. And you know what I mean? Like we all think we're you're a you, I'm a me. I've got my enemies, I've got my friends. But from this perspective, it's like, oh no, none of that. All that's based on this fundamental confusion regarding the identity. Like we think we're a one thing or an I or something, which we clearly are in relative reality. But it's interesting to imagine that that actually isn't quite the case.
All my favorite theologians, that would be something that they would agree on. Even just Jewish and Christian ones, like they would say, "How could I do anything but marvel at myself?" Not in an egotistical way, but marvel at the self. Like any self is like a marvel and a wonder. And of course it's gotten debased so many ways,
Yeah, and like to what you're saying too, Duncan, it's like, we were talking early on, Oteil and I, about how, like, I mentioned we're so concerned about peeling back layer after layer of the onion to find out more and more. And I'm like, we need to start just putting layers back on and realize we're just a fucking onion. Like that's it. Like, instead of always self-criticizing and self-analyzing, just realize, like, I'm an imperfect being and I have to be okay with that. And then I can go, like, kind of navigate through. I like to think of it as, like, I've been thinking about it more and more, spending so much time alone in the past year, which is terrifying. Because I've been doing everything possible. Why do I pick a career like stand-up where you're always chasing the tail? Yeah. You're never happy. You're purposefully tripolar, basically.
Tripolar.
And like now I have time to, like, stop and, like, look and trace my steps back and let those guards that are on watch from 20-something years ago be like, hey, you're off. You can clock off now. We're okay. Like, go back 35 years ago, that guard wear it with his shield and go, hey, it's good. We're settled. Like, you can go home to your family now, guard. And just start to, like, unravel and fix the kinks in the hose so the water can kind of flow again smoothly. And that part of this process of kind of just self-analysis, but more self-acceptance, is making me realize that the love has always been there. Yeah. I just haven't been looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, good God, no, I don't want to be like Ram Dass. When I met him, he like pointed to his head and said, we've got to get you from here to here. And we can do that. And it was, when you meet a master like that, it's like the instruction, everything they say means it's the rest of your life you'll be thinking about that.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Because when they say it,
like, why did they order that?
Yeah, exactly. And because they don't just say, it's like more than words. Like it's like something else is happening that you can't understand. So you're crying, but you don't know why. And it's like, but yeah, that. So I practice Buddhism, so there's steps, and there's a process. And the first process is kind of sort of in Tibetan Buddhism, the word for meditation is gom, which means self-knowing. So it's a practice of sort of getting a kind of focus and stability in your attention. And there's various ways of doing it, but it's like they call it the mind stream. So it's beginning to understand the mind stream, and mostly in that understanding, you start realizing, oh, like the thoughts, they don't stop. So they say the mind creates thoughts in the way that the tongue salivates. It is actually like you will never apparently you can stop it, but in general, it's better to just become aware. Number one, that your thoughts are always changing. Number two, that they don't have any coherence. Like there's an illusion that you're like going from point A to point B to point C with your thinking process, but it's more of like a shotgun scatter of like random thoughts, a few of which grab your attention. And that grabbing of your attention, that's where you start defining yourself by these like few main thoughts that keep emerging. And sadly, for most of us, those thoughts are, you really think you'd observe anything you're getting? You know what I mean? But there's a lot of other thoughts going on too. That's just the one that's the most, like the thought of like, God, I think I want some more water. God damn, that egg biscuit I had, I think that was bad. I hope I don't get food poisoning, or all those things. They kind of go by, but the one that's like, get the fuck out of here, you fraud.
You fraud.
Like, you know what I mean? You're like, oh, how dare me call myself that? And then, so that gets, so basically, they could track hurricanes now by, like really early into the cycle, just by depressions in the barometric pressure. I'm not a meteorologist. I'm trying to imagine I know how they do it, but I know they can do it. But similarly, from like a practice of mindfulness, you really can start identifying these sort of little weather systems of thought that can lead to reactivity and like making bad choices and furthering your negative karma. And you can actually, you can change them at that before they get big. And so that's the second part of the process, leads to a thing called bodhicitta. Bodhicitta. I don't know how to pronounce it. I've been corrected both ways, so I don't know. But basically, the second part, or what happens is you start having these fucking crazy moments where you're like, when it was happening for me a while ago, the first time it happened, I called my meditation teacher, because I'd just been sitting under a tree meditating. And at the time, I just didn't like meditating anyway, but I was doing it because my form of Buddhism is called a practice tradition. So you have to meditate, or you're not really practicing it. Right. And but all of a sudden, my heart broke. Like there was nothing happening, man. But all of a sudden, I felt the deepest, like lonely, painful, unbearable. All I thought was it's because of my mom, or I don't know. And I called him up and I was like, what the fuck was that? And he's like, that's what your practice should radiate out from. That is the thing. That is it. That's what we're all running away from. Wow. That's it. And that's why nobody wants to go down there at first, because the feeling itself is actually kind of ecstatic. It's nirvana, really. But the story you will tell yourself within a millisecond of feeling it is, God, I don't want to lose anybody. My heart is broken. What's wrong with me? So that's where it gets really interesting, is it's the cultivating of that specific thing that most people call heartbreak. Heartbreak is the story they tell themselves about it, but the thing itself, theoretically, if you're able to really like cultivate this, then all the other stuff takes care of itself. So, like
that's
everything
where mine
else
started.
Is that where it started? And how did you get there?
Well, but mine was my addiction and drove me there to the bottom, and at the bottom I had nowhere to look but up, and I reached out, and then it happened. But it started with the heartbreak, and then like you said, was ecstatic. But it's the thing that you don't want to face. And I just was like, I had nowhere else to go. I was on the bottom. There was maybe death. I'm not a suicidal guy. So for me, I was on the bottom. I had run out of options, I felt. So then I was ready to face it. And then it was like, okay, now we can start.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've been running before then the whole time for 30 some years, almost 40.
Yeah, that is the culture. I mean, I remember when I started realizing that even my frenetic attempts at making podcasts and art and music, it was another form of evasion. I was I was thinking I was inspired when I was just terrified of dealing with that feeling. I was confusing inspiration, with like just purely not wanting to deal with that feeling. Which is so bizarre that is the feeling. That is it. That's it.
I always wonder how much of it is cultural and how much of it is just human nature, like across the board. Because like on some levels, I'm like, okay, a workaholic, better that than cocaine. They'll probably live longer. But then there's a tab to pay for that. You know what I mean? So I'm like, is that our particular Western culture, which I've always been fighting against my guilt about not embracing the hustle and all that stuff. Yeah. It's a constant theme for me. And I just have to be like, no. But I wonder, man, is that just our culture though, or is it just human nature, just across the board? Because we'll evade some kind of way. So we'll use everything, right? Work, food, whatever.
Sex,
anything
TV.
You possibly can. Yeah. Looking at a calendar and seeing like, a couple empty dates, and you're like, I have to fill those dates. Yeah. I have to be working more. I'm not working enough. I've brought up on this on the podcast, Duncan, I've been watching this show Alone on Hulu, and I don't know if you've seen it, but people go off and live on their own and they have to self-document. It's like Survivor, but like by themselves, and it's like last person to tap out wins $500,000 or whatever. But once they have their shelter built, once they have their gill net out to catch fish, once they have their fire, or they found their source of clean water, and they're left with just them. Yeah. That's when the show really starts. And that's where they're staring into the lens of the camera in their tent going, my brain wasn't ready. Physically I can make it, but my spirit and my brain are not ready to get to know themselves, And it's like you watch the breakdown and I'm like, oh Jesus, this is what I've been doing since I was 8. This is fucking crazy. You know what I mean? It's wild to see. I'm like, I think I might be good on this show. Physically I can't do it, but mentally I think I'm a pro. I when I first started meditating, I remember telling my teacher, when I do it, I can't do it for more than 3 minutes. It feels like I'm on fire, David. And he's like, that's in you, right? Like, that's not the meditation making you feel like you're on fire. Like, that's already there. Yeah. And that's called hot boredom. And so it's like the frantic kind of boredom you get, hot boredom. And then over time, you get to experience cool boredom, which is, like just that a very present sort of awareness, which is, it's, this is what's wonderful about being human, is that I think it's like we get to reincarnate in a lifetime. So I think that's so amazing. When you look back at the different phases in your own life,
pre-realization when you were hitting rock bottom, whoever that was before that, that might as well have been a different life. Might as well have been a different incarnation. And, from that, you could probably understand reincarnation a little bit from looking at your own various phases. But, that sort of, when I look at my dogs, I see that same energy that I display when I'm doing workaholic stuff. They're, kind of frantic, like, what are you doing? You're looking for food, like, digging under stuff, looking around, like just a constant sort of pacing. So that means that's an animal thing, right? So we can, in the human life, stop being animals. And that's nuts. That is really nuts. The possibility is really crazy. It's a really crazy thing that it's like, I'm trying to think of there's a saying, confusion is on the continuum of enlightenment. That's something Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, I didn't understand that. Y'all understand. When I heard that the first time, I was like, what the fuck does that even mean? But it means like, well, there's the part of you that's aware of your workaholism. What is that part? That's the part that's holding all the other stuff inside of it. The awareness field, all that stuff is happening within the awareness field, but we're identifying ourselves with the stuff happening within the awareness field and not the awareness field.
Not the whole thing.
Right. Yeah, right. That's the trick. It's like one of those stupid optical illusions.
Magic eye puzzles. Yeah,
yes,
totally.
That's what it is. It's like that we're trapped in some kind of magic eye puzzle.
Like all of it... it's not the total thing, but it requires a lot of acceptance. Because I have this thing like, I believe in God or whatever, the force or whatever you want to call it. And I think that thing is love, right? But at the same time, I know that true love, for it to be true, has to be able to be rejected. So it's just a yin yang thing. Like, we have to accept confusion because we have to accept hate and hell on earth and hell in our minds and
that part
all these things to understand what real love is. Like, you don't get, so it requires a lot of acceptance, even though that's not the whole ball of wax, for you to get. You got to do some work too. I'm interested, how did you settle on your particular practice? Because I know Ram Dass, he was, I guess everybody had their different, veins that they approached,
I was interviewing, they were letting me interview like Ram Dass and all, and like these really like real spiritual leaders who all had their own community. I think Ram Dass thought it was funny because at the time I was like cynical, and they thought I was talking to them in ways that he thought it was funny, which is one of the reasons I love them. Is it's really hard to blaspheme, or it's hard to offend them, so I was getting to interview all these people, and I think I asked them, because they, many of them are into bhakti yoga and they're into Hanuman.
Monkey.
The deity Hanuman. And I think I asked one of them is Hanuman impermanent? Like, is that being going to be around forever? And I don't remember what they said, but my teacher was in the audience and he was laughing because he's a Buddhist. But then he went up to Raghu at some point and said, Duncan, he seems nice, but he doesn't have a practice. Like, what's his thing? What does he just talk?
He seems nice.
Yeah, it's really like, but that's also in the type of Buddhism I'm saying, it's called wrathfulness, but it's full of love, but it hurt. Raghu was like, told me he said that, and I was like, fuck that guy, what the fuck? And I'm like, but he's totally right. I have no practice. I just like yap. And so then I started, I told him, well, why don't you teach me how to meditate? And so there was a formality to it. And then I was sitting with him in our first session together, I guess you would call it. And he said, I'm going to tell you what my teacher told me. And he meant it. This is hopeless. And I laughed so hard, and I'm like, this is definitely my fucking meditation teacher. This is awesome. That's where you're going to start with it's hopeless. It was so funny and cool and perfect.
Just to let you know this isn't going to work. Now go ahead and close your eyes.
Yeah, this is hopeless.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a great place to start. It's a great place to start. But yeah, so that's how so then, you know, I just got lucky, and it's not really, you know, it's a very, I guess it's very pragmatic, you know, like I know you know, the displays that you're talking about of like weird shit, like once I was like annoyed with him. I don't remember what I was annoyed about, but I was annoyed, and I thought to myself, because like I think he practices martial arts or something, but I was just like, I bet he'd punch you in the face. And I got a text from him not long after thinking that. And in the text said, the real punch in the face is you meditating every day.
Whoa. It's hopeless.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was like one of those moments where you're looking at your phone and you're realizing, like, I certainly wouldn't have called him and been like, would you punch me in the face? And yet somehow that happened. And then you're just like, well, definitely I don't know everything. Like that, you know, that you don't know, we don't know.
And that's the undeniable shit that makes you realize that we don't know anything. And that's the beautiful part about it. You know, you put something out there. My brother sent me a text going like, give me a recommendation for like a good podcast on psychedelics. And I had just not had the chance to write him back. It was towards the end of the night, and I wake up with a text from O'Teal with a podcast, and the title of it was like psychedelics without the drugs or something. Isn't that what it was called, O'Teal, I think?
The psychedelic experience without the psychedelics. Yeah.
Without the psychedelics. And I'm like, well, there's the podcast that I need to, and I listened to it, and it was like a benchmark moment. Wow. For it. It was like a puzzle piece. I needed to figure out the rest of the pieces. Yeah. And I'm like, well, Robbie, you're going to love this. And I sent it to him, and I was like, oh, this is from O'Teal without you even asking him. You asked me, he must have heard. I didn't mention it to him.
Actually, it came from my wife. So he asked you, and the universe used my wife through me back to him.
And I didn't ask for it, but I listened to it, and it was such a great, like, to talk about the psychedelic experience without eating a microdose or taking a giant hit of acid or hitting a DMT pen. Like, that's the part that this year, this lockdown or pandemic or whatever, that's the beautiful part of it. Yeah. These, like, the psychedelic cream is rising to the top, and you don't have to be sitting here dosing to find it. No. You know what? That's the part that the conversations with people from all parts of life that are on to the same frequency is really powerful. So like that shit happens, and that's the stuff you got to pay attention to.
That's right. It's called Rigpa, and not Rigpa. It's called, oh damn it, Tendril. Tendril is the name for the synchronicity that happens related to that kind of conversation or practice. And it's interesting how addictive it is. You know, that's the other weird thing is if you start getting the synchronicities and you start thinking if they're not coming, you're doing something wrong. You're out of flow or something like that. You know, like they're
Mine
weirdly,
always keep coming.
They do. That's a good. That's well, it can be unnerving. I've met people who've gotten like in a synchronicity echo chamber where.
Well, that may not be good.
Yeah, they're not prepared for it or something like that. And I think that is kind of that's sort of the graceful quality of a lot of these teachers is that they, like Ram Dass, is that they probably could do things that would freak you the fuck out, but they know they're good at seeing maybe that's not what you need right now. Like if you're gonna get lost in wanting to do magic or having powers, and that really is like a sand trap ultimately that a lot of people get stuck in. Who can blame them? It's really cool, but it's a bit of a sand trap. It's a bit of a sticky place. You know, sticky as in like you can get stuck there for a long time, many lifetimes.
Yeah, it's not the thing. It's like a signpost. People can get, I want to know where, it's like that movie Soul. Did you see that movie Soul?
Yeah,
the best.
so good.
They talk about the zone, you know, like my zone is playing music.
Yeah.
The Colonel, my mentor, Colonel Bruce Hampton, who did he guessed my birthday within 3 minutes of my birthday, and he didn't know my last name.
Wow.
I was like, wait a minute.
Impossible.
He looks like an old homeless guy, you know what I mean? And he's done, all the people that know him, he's done crazy psychic stuff, but that was not the thing. Like, you know, you can get caught up in, ask him, hey, Bruce, you know, do it to him or whatever, but that's not the thing. It's like
it's not a parlor trick. Yeah.
Well, it can be. You can reduce it to that, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But it's like it's pointing to like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean that he goes, oh no, the real punch in the face is you meditating every.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Not that he got you. That's to go, what does this mean?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, he always says to me, like, Duncan, well, now I am meditating regularly, but in the early days of me not doing that, he would say, Duncan, am I your meditation teacher? And I would say, yeah. And he would say, are you meditating regularly? And I'd say, no. And he would say, well, what kind of teacher does that make me?
A hopeless one.
Yeah.
oh Lord, we're so good at just like getting off track. It's so funny, man. It's like with the synchronicities. This is the exact same thing. Yeah, it's great that they happen. To me, they're like my little friends. I was like, hey, dude, you know. Yeah. But some people, if you get lost in it, it's like you're not getting it. It's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? This timing that it's so, the odds are so against it. What does that mean? And it should be reassuring.
Right. I do find it as a sign that you're like there's something to pay attention to. At the very least, it's look at this, whatever it may be. And I think the dead talk to us. Not to get back to talking about but I do think they talk to us through synchronicities. Like that's one of the communication mechanisms from people that have passed. Is their new like vocabulary is. You know, my friend, his dad passed and he bought his dad's house where he grew up in, and the deal closed on his dad's birthday.
Whoa.
You know, it's like, that's a communication from his father. Yeah. But that, you know, it's the same with psychedelics though, you know, when I'm sure we've all gone through psychedelic phases, and I certainly did with LSD. I love it so much, and I was frustrated by the problem of having to like double up doses, you know, like that I loved it so much. I wanted to be high on acid every day. But then over time you start realizing like, what is it you're looking for here? Like, what are you seeking here? Because all the magic stuff, the breathing walls, the impossible geometries, the variety of like the telepathy that might manifest in a great psychedelic trip, or all of those things, you start realizing those are just like a light show, but there's something else here. And what is that thing? I think
that's the zone in
the zone
in Soul.
Totally.
That's the zone. Yes.
That's what I was like, why would you get stuck in the hallway if the zone is this connector between this world and the next? Why would you stay in the hallway?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you pass through to the other side? Now you're not living in either side. You're not living on the physical plane or the spiritual plane. You're living in the light show. Yeah. It's like, man, go one way or the other, or both. Move freely between both, you know?
Yeah.
And it's amazing when meditations, like dreams, sometimes can like follow you back into consciousness and you can't shake it. And there's been a couple where, like, you know, I think I was telling you, Oteil, about one where I was just like this giant control board that I just could not, like, the lights were buzzing and sensors were going on and off, and I was trying to like figure out how to operate this thing. And then I came out of my meditation. But it's been in meditation, and I've been going back and forth to it, where it's like this kind of dark dimly lit room where I just, as far up as I look and as far left and right, it's just levers and knobs and switches and lights. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, I should know how to operate this, but I almost can't even like use my hands. And it's followed me through from meditations to dreams. And it's something that I've been like, but at least the way I'm thinking about it is like, at least I know where this control board is now. And I think that with, you know, to me, that's like the zone as well, where it's like psychedelics and like the visions and the fractals and all that. That's the hold music. While, you know, the mechanic rewires the board. You know what I mean? Like, just enjoy the show while we fix the shit. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's so. Just let the
why is the hold music me hovering over a cemetery, watching my parents bury me? Can I get different hold music, please?
How great would that? This LSD comes with your choice of hold music.
Do you want to see your face melt into some combination skull and sea monster?
Press
no,
one.
I'll pass on that, please. Because for me, the great LSD trips were always the ones where I'd taken enough that I experienced that wonderful moment where you do become everything, where you are no longer encumbered by the identity. And you don't even know that you've been there until you've come back into the identity. And that's where the light show happens. Yeah. But, you know, this is the story of Ram Dass giving LSD to Neem Karoli Baba. Are you all familiar with that
story?
Yes,
I do.
Love this.
Coolest story. But the long and short of it is no reaction. And and to me, I think that is an indication of where he was hanging out, which was he was way past the light show. Yeah. And so it couldn't really do anything to him because he was always in that state or place. Or actually, I would say calling it a state or a place is confusing. It is the only place. It is the only place. I mean, that is where we're at. And the everything else is what's called obscuring emotions. That's all it. Clouds in the sky. Everything. Feelings, thinking, all of it is just transient sort of phenomena that is covering up the reality of our fundamental goodness. Is what that's what we actually really are. It's we're just fundamentally good, but there's a lot of we got circuit boards, you know what I mean? We've
flat
got
tires,
like, flat tires. We got, you know, love and memories, man. God, now when I'm meditating, I'll sit there and just zoom through my life. Like, why am I remembering? I'm remembering like some completely like walking into a Starbucks and like the like early 2000s. Why is this memory here? What the fuck is this? You know, what is that? It's all in us. It's the snow globe effect. That's what's happening here. Is we're all snow globes and we've been pretty shaken up.
We are. I know. I feel like our self is, you know, earlier, Mike, when you said, you know, I'm my perfect self. And I had the thought, what if we're actually perfect? What if our self is perfect? But like you said, it's just dented. We got dented and bruised and scarred and beat up along the way. But now, if we can somehow, which I can only do by the grace of a miraculous way of looking at it, I can say, well, I'm not the dented can. I'm the perfect can that got dented. So inside the dented can is this other can that's perfect. Now, if I could just shed, like I'm holding on to all the dents. Yeah. And this, when I look at it this way, you know what I mean? That's kind of what I got from theology. I mean, that's why I was so excited to have you on, Duncan, because you're one of the few people like on the cutting edge that
Thank you.
Like Ram Dass is not afraid to talk about God. I feel like God is such a dirty word. And then when I got this revelation that God is love, I was like, oh, then now I understand it. I like to think my son would have taught me, like he loves me even though I'm all screwed up. So if, you know, he thinks I'm perfect. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the problem is you are. I mean, that is the problem. That's a problem if you want to be anything else.
It's true.
It's, you know, that's the problem.
If you want to hold on.
Yeah.
Because it's me holding on.
Yeah. And it's a natural reaction, though. I mean, it's like that is just that's why, there's suffering. Why do we suffer? We suffer because we're holding on to those dents. Yeah. And we're, because it seems scary to not really be anything at all. That's scary because our whole culture is about being a thing. Everything's, we dress ourselves, we put oil into our skin, and we try to like keep our bodies a certain way, and we try to ignore like the seemingly like there's a teacher called Lama Suryadas. He said the great miracle is that if you want a great miracle in the world is nobody seems to really realize they're gonna die. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what a miracle! Like, we're all going around here acting like we're at any given moment. You know what I mean? Not gonna lose everything at any given moment, and that is scary. Yes. But the reason it's scary is because you think you have something to lose. That's why it's scary. And so self-knowing is where you begin this analysis starts happening. And within the analysis, it's like what Ram Dass said when he was on his most famous mushroom trip, where he just started like the various forms of him. The Ram Dass, the intellectual, disappeared. Ram Dass, the sophisticate who could fly a plane, disappeared. Then he like looked down at his body, and that was disappearing too. And he famously said, "Who's minding the store here?" And so,
I love that so much.
Yeah, man.
So funny.
We are in a real, like, kind of sad situation in that everything's reversed here. So beings are suffering because they're exerting themselves as a being. It's called ignorance. And but when really like yes, there is a being here, but that's as impermanent can be, non-distinct from any other thing. You think there's a this and a that, but really it's all the same identical thing. And I wish I could report that at this very moment I have achieved samadhi or some shit and I'm not a thing, but sometimes little glimpses of it, tiny glimpses of it. What a relief. That's the other, I'm listening to a great book called Joyful Wisdom by Mingyur Khyentse Rinpoche. Best description of enlightenment I ever heard. He said it's like using the bathroom. It's like peeing when you've had to pee for a long time.
Yeah. It's presence.
Yeah. It's a relief. You don't have to wait to get home to go. In fact, you can feel like that. That is you. That is you. Like that is what you actually are. Is that,
Thinking about death can sort that out too, because now that I had a kid late, I know you're about to have a kid.
I have one, and another one's on the way.
Oh,
like
okay.
Any minute,
How old is your first one?
Literally any minute. Like, wow. This is my second one. But she's like due date is like a few days from now, and we just don't know. I'm like, bags are packed. I'm ready to go at any second now.
So happy for you.
How old is your first kid?
2.
Oh yeah, so it's still late. I had my first one at 50, and now it's
Congrats.
Like, when you talk about how thinking about death can really sort out stuff easily, because now I always think about that. Like, people ask me how you have so much fun on a gig. I'm like, on every gig, I'm like, if I'm not having fun, something's really defeating me, like a bad headache, or I'm inside my own head, because I know this could be my last gig. Every person that died in my life, I thought, wow, I didn't know that gig was going to be the last friggin' time I ever played with them in this life, right? Unless they come back and I play with them again. But, it's like that with my son. When he was born, it just like shifted everything. And now I don't have to worry. Like, I think about, I could die at any moment. So I'm going to take whatever extra moments I can grab to love my wife and him and my daughter, Kavi, harder, and just steal time for them
Yeah.
You know, like I just keep stealing. Now I'm getting greedy. The pandemic, I was like, oh yeah, you know. But that keeps me. It's always that thought, you know.
You are so simultaneously enlightened and hard on yourself.
It's a double-edged butter knife, dude.
Express the most beautiful thing, which is you've realized, like, and honestly, that is like Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who is my teacher's teacher, said, if you want to like make the world better, you know, look into the isms, communism, capitalism, whatever it may be. But if you really want things to be better, make them better in your family. You know, like that's give your. So I don't think that's stealing necessarily.
You know, I mean, I think that from the experiences of like Oteil, what you were saying, like this could be your last gig. This could be your, you know, like with comedy being non-existent. And then I had these like a pocket of like no, like COVID cases kind of down in the summer. I remember doing gigs and being like, I bombed. I suck at this. I can't use any of my old stuff. And I remember talking to you, Oteil, on the way back from Providence, I think. And I was just like, tomorrow I'm driving back and doing 2 more shows, and I need to treat them like they are my last 2 shows.
Wow.
And I had the fun, Duncan, of being a comic in my first year of comedy, where I was just like honored to be up on stage. I wasn't beating the shit out of myself every half second, you know what I mean? And it just felt like, okay, like I got 20 minutes left. Like this is the last 20 minutes. It's like what, like when a quarterback's going to retire after his like, you know, last losing season. It's just like enjoy the last ride. And it felt great. And it made me enjoy the shows that I was able to do afterwards. And it is an incredible, like, it's a gift to know how valuable nothing is. You know what I mean? Like nothingness. I had a conversation about like, what does happiness feel like? And I said, you know, like when you were a kid and you were in a in-ground pool and you're walking from the shallow to the deep and you're at that step right where if you take one step forward, you can't touch bottom anymore.
Yeah.
But if you take a step back, you're in the shallow and you kind of just hover there and you let go of the side of the pool. And for that millisecond, you're kind of like, am I drowning? Am I swimming? Am I safe? Am I not? And then you realize like, I'm just here. Like I'm just floating. And that moment is like, to me, that's transcendence. That's psychedelia. That's happiness. And to have that, to taste that and know that it's there, that's the fun of life now.
You know, I was there for that first moment that Nigel could tread water. And we live in Florida. You know, so many people have pools down here.
Yeah.
I'm in the pool and he's hugging the wall, you know, and I'm like right there in case he just goes under. And I even thought, I was like, I wonder if he's going to start doing it right now. And he just started treading water. And boy, you talk about the happiness, like what you experience. He just lit up and man, he went back and forth across that pool when he realized like, oh, it was one of the high points of my whole life, man. For real. Just being there for that second. I was like, wow.
It's great to be a dad. It's so cool, man. It's so cool. Yeah, that treading water thing, that's it. I mean, I think like you get to be an adult though. You get to be an adult and you start thinking you've probably mostly experienced what you're going to experience. You know, there's a kind of sad familiarity with reality that it naturally can occur if you're not careful. A kind of, you know, it's like when you have gravy, it crusts over or something, you know. So now you think you know everything. You think you've smelled everything. You think you've tasted everything. Certainly, you can't imagine that much else could possibly surprise you. This is ignorance, you know. And then that treading water thing, that example, it's so great because that is the possibility as a human. Is suddenly it's like you're treading water, but in time and space.
Yeah.
You're treading, you know what I mean? You're already dead. I mean, that's the other thing. Like we're sitting here acting, you know what I mean? We're sitting here talking as though we're not already dead. I mean, that's the real interesting aspect of it is like you really like, well, you have no past. You know what I mean? Like you can't go back a second before this.
Yeah.
And there is no future. Your mind's invented like a past via picking out specific memories So it's like we are kind of like centipedes with one segment, pretending we have this long segment going back into the past when that shit is gone. That's just gone. And also, the other thing is most of us are living in forgotten memories. You don't remember much. No. And the stuff you do remember is all of your, if you're me, it's a lifetime of various drugs. It's definitely not in HD. Let's just put it that way.
It's illustrated.
Remember those hurts, though, don't we?
Yes.
You know, somehow we hold on to those bad boys.
I mean, earlier we were talking about it. It's like that's the real key. Is like, you know, Duncan, you were talking about like, you know, you leave that person behind, you leave that reality behind, and we have a chance to kind of we're reincarnated all within this life. But the key to reincarnation is to kind of like, it's a new life. I got to leave that other one behind, you know? Right. And the hard part is kind of always that, like, hey, remember when you fucked up? You know, like that guy, the critic, when you're finally going forward and it's like, wait a minute, you forgot this baggage.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, carry this with you.
Yeah. Still lugging it around.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, this is the practice I just love the even if it's just a thought experiment, I just love the idea of the rarity of a human birth, and then, you know, adding to that the intention of, as cheesy as it sounds, these cynical days of helping other people. That's the idea, is you're going to try to get enlightened now, but you're not going to even do it for yourself. The reason you're going to get enlightened is because, like, a lot of people don't even ever, not to pat ourselves on the back, but a lot of people don't even have these conversations.
Right.
They're people deeply, deeply, deeply trapped in their identity. And so everyone's like, fucking Trump. I'm certainly one of them. It's hard not to be like that when you see a mini tyrant. You know, you're like, you motherfucker. But the idea is like, those are the people who deserve all of the compassion because they are fucking so in their own identity and so stuck. Yeah. And then the other part of it here's a real mind trip part of it. This is the part that just, and I've been trying to work with it, but it's really difficult. Your worst enemy, the person who hurt you the most, from this perspective, is considered your greatest teacher.
Yep.
So when you meditate or think on them, you imagine all the merit from your entire life, all the good you've achieved flowing into them, and all of their sorrow flowing into you. So you are giving them everything you have. And the reason behind that is because if they really have hurt you because they're violent or deluded, it is terrible karma. And the idea is like, no matter what they have done to you, would you want to see them being dipped into molten copper by demons for 100 lifetimes? Has it been that? Was it that bad? And most people would be like, well, maybe like one lifetime, but not 100, you know? So from this perspective, the idea is like, oh, fuck, I don't want that for anybody. And I certainly don't want that for someone who at one point was my mother, who would have given me anything, but now is incarnated accidentally as my enemy here. I wouldn't want that for my mother or my son. And I certainly wouldn't want it for them. So then you start doing this practice of taking anytime anyone gives you the jab and that ego gets all inflamed, you have to bow to them like, thank you. You showed me where I'm stuck. Thank you. You reminded me where I'm stuck. And also, I don't want your teaching to hurt you. So I'm taking all the bad karma back from you into me and giving you everything I have. Try that. It's a mind fuck, man. It trips me out trying to do it. It's really hard.
But the person that is hurting you like that is in that molten hell right now.
Well, yeah.
That's why it's easier for me, because I've been in the molten hell. You know, I don't think I hurt people as bad as what some other people did, but I did. And I know what a hell it was. And I know, you know, I know that people, when they do that, they're already in hell.
Yeah.
You know?
Through hypnotherapy, I had a session where you picture someone who hurt you, you know, and you see them hurting you and visualize how that makes you feel. Like, what type of person does it make you feel? And it made me feel like a scared child, kind of like huddled up, you know? And it's like, well, what anger causes that? How are they currently feeling? Like, how do you see them acting and feeling? And you're like, they feel angry and they feel scared. And it's like, now picture them and what's motivating that action from them. And the wall breaks down and you just see that scared, huddled up, shivering child that they really are.
Yeah.
And now you're pitying the person who hurt you the most. And you're like, I'm not, you know, we're not alone in how we feel. You know, like your enemy and you are feeling very similar in some of those points. And it's a powerful visualization when you're like, we're both just scared children wearing big
annoying.
Skin suits, you know? It's super annoying.
Because you want to hurt. You know what I mean? That's the problem. It fucks up the whole game. You know, like all of a sudden you don't get to do it. It ruins and that's why they say attachment. Because you realize, oh my God, I was so attached to my aggression. I was so attached. Like I needed you to not be a child. I needed you to be like Darth Vader, and under the Darth Vader mask was another Darth Vader that went on forever instead. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Not some vulnerable old man who had like some kind of fucking breathing issue.
I'm sure
you see a wet baby just fucking yelling at you. You're never going to amount to nothing. Shut up, little wet baby.
You little wet baby.
You've read the Book of the Tao, I'm sure, Duncan, right?
The Tao Te Ching?
Yeah.
I have, I've read it when I was younger. And, I remember little bits of it, but I certainly don't remember all of it. Are you into that?
I've read it. I go back to it over the years. That's the first book my mentor ever gave me. But one of the things, what you mentioned, you know, is this quote that I've often mentioned on the podcast is that it says, what is a good man but a bad man's teacher, and what is a bad man but a good man's job?
Whoa. Yeah.
And it's hard because we don't want it's what you said, like all these, like we'll say our enemy is the violent Trumpers.
Yeah.
Whatever section. So it's like, great. So I'm supposed to, they're my job to love them, try to teach them or help them understand that I'm not there. And like, I just want to go away. Like, I don't even care. Like, you're free to exist and have your shitty opinions. I don't even want to censor you. Just don't mess with me.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you're on the hook. Like you said, there's so many people that don't even have these conversations, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, it is our job. And that's just, oh, God, what a drag.
What a drag.
What else are you going to do?
But you have to think about like you need to look at the definition of teaching, right? Like, you don't have to go like hold their hand through it. You lead by example. Sometimes you lead by silence or thanking them. Like Duncan said, like there's certain ways that like everything could be a learning experience if people are open to learning. And that's the hard part. You know, you beat your head against the wall if people are like, you're not going to change everyone's mind. But if you're able to like have a podcast where we talk about shit like this, we're putting it out there for you to listen to and think. And you know, that part you are teaching. It's, you know, it's not up to you to spoon feed it.
Right. It definitely needs to be consensual for sure. The other advice that in this great book I'm listening to is definitely don't try this shit when you know, don't act like you're a fucking fireman just because you have this you want to put a fire out. Like, you're gonna get burned up if you do that. Like, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know anything about putting out fires. It's something you learn and then go do it, you know? Because you could, you could really get people killed. Like, maybe a real fireman didn't go into the place because they thought you were a real fireman because you tricked them, and then two people die. So there is the idea of like, ultimately, it's great.
And the real fireman doesn't get overtime.
Yeah, then you're costing him, the real fireman, his job. He didn't get fucking overtime. And then maybe like he gets a stomach ulcer, which progresses into some horrible disease. He like shits his guts out and his kid walks in and sees that and then turns into a serial killer. Hundreds of people get murdered because you pretended to be a fucking fireman. You asshole. Don't do it. But because the idea, but so the simple math that the Dalai Lama says is, if you know, or that's in Tibetan Buddhism, you hear it is if you can't help, don't hurt.
Yes.
Simple as that. Know if you can't help, don't be. There's nothing wrong with that. Like if you see some like raging fascist monster, what are you gonna do? Like but there is a way to not like, you know, progress their shitty karma and that usually that involves just don't interact with them. Don't give them firewood to burn their stupid, to immolate themselves. Yeah. You know?
I feel like sometimes the universe definitely sends people my way, you know, and or even put them in my orbit so it won't just be once, you know. Yeah. Nigel, I'm doing a podcast still, honey. Can I tell you something? In a minute, sweetheart. I'm sorry.
So
Duncan,
cool.
Duncan, I mean, you've got a lot going on. You've got your baby could be crowning at the moment. So we don't want to keep you too much longer.
Better not be. I'm dead fucking meat if the baby is crowning. This will be my last podcast.
We just wanted to, like, you know, will you come back on? Will you hang out again?
Anytime. Hey, if y'all have time, I'd love to reverse it and have y'all on my podcast. Just
absolutely.
Continue this conversation. It's really cool that you let me be on your show, man. This is this made my day. It's great meeting you.
Same for me, man. It's such a high point. I was so excited when I found out you were going to come on. I was like, oh boy, you know, and you both know this, when your dreams come true better than what your dreams were, that's when you're kicking, man.
Yeah.
So thank you, man.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Good luck and congratulations on the baby.
Thanks, y'all. Hey, but seriously, I don't know if you have someone has my email from over there, so let's set up. I mean, my schedule is, I'm about to go off radar for about a month when the baby comes, but maybe we'll have time before that if you'll have time. If you're not too busy, let's figure it out.
100%, man. We'll make time. That would be incredible.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Bless you, brother.
Thanks for listening. Peace.
Yeah, peace. Bye.